Welcome everyone. I think we might kick things off now. So yeah, welcome to this webinar, which is focused on a new market assessment that's aiming to accelerate innovation in critical minerals, particularly in developing countries. So UNIDO recently launched this at COP29 about sort of a week and a half ago. We had an event to sort of launch the key findings, and this market assessment was commissioned to Columbia University, who have done the analysis and research and are here today to present some of the key findings. And this particular market assessment comes under UNIDO's Accelerate to Demonstrate facility, which is funded by the UK government's Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. So in this webinar, we'll give you a little bit of background as well on the background to the market assessment, the facility that's funded this market assessment, and then most of the time we'll hear from Columbia University, who will present the key findings from this market assessment. There'll be a chance to have questions and answers as well. So we have about 15 minutes for that. But of course, if you've got any questions that we can't cover in this webinar today, please do email this through and we can respond to those questions as well. And maybe just to introduce myself, so I'm Peter Warren and I head up this Accelerate to Demonstrate facility in UNIDO. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Valeria, who's the Critical Minerals Lead for this programme, to introduce the programme.
Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here and to provide a little bit more about the A2D facility and also UNIDO. Caro, please. So for those of you that don't know about UNIDO, UNIDO is the UN agency for the promotion of inclusive and sustainable industrial development in developing countries. We have 3 mandates, which are supporting sustainable supply chains, limiting climate breakdown, and ending hunger. And we do this through UNIDO's expertise on technical assistance and capacity building, investment and innovation funding, and partnerships and collaboration, and policy and dialogues. The A2D facility is very in line with these mandates, especially through the whole process of the supply chain, in this case of critical minerals, supporting the supply chain of critical minerals for the energy transition. From UNIDO, we have different programs in critical minerals, not only, of course, the Accelerate to Demonstrate facility, but also we have, for example, the Global Alliance and Partnership for Responsible and Green Minerals, which was launched this year with the purpose of putting together different stakeholders on the private sector, government institutions, and financial institutions too, in order to support countries on the sustainable critical mineral supply chain. We have as well, we support also the UN framework on just transition for critical energy minerals, but also all agreements and multilaterals in terms of related with critical minerals, but also on mining, as for example, the Minamata Convention and the Stockholm Convention. As well as part of UNIDO, we have different portfolios that cover all related with circular economy on different sectors of the industries. And by this, we have this new program, which is covering, which is called Global Electronic Management Program. And it's really focused on circular economy, on e-waste from different countries worldwide, and working together with other UN agencies. And now I would like to talk a little bit about the Accelerate to Demonstrate facility. So this facility was launched based on the challenge that 35% of the emission reductions needed by 2050 will come from technologies that are still in development and have not reached markets at commercial scale. And with this, the A2D facility aims to accelerate the commercialization of innovation, clean energy solutions in developing countries, but mainly to have projects that create the catalytic and scalable ideas or technologies in four main thematic areas, which are critical minerals, clean hydrogen, smart energy, and industrial decarbonization. The A2D facility was started with an initial contribution of approximately 80 million USD from the UK government, and it started operations in April of 2023 and will finished on March of 2029. Projects are supported through this facility through an open call, and the first call took place in July of 2024. The idea of these calls is that we are providing projects or grants of from 1 to 5 USD million per project. And of course, these projects need to focus also on the SDG mandates of the 13, 1, and 9. As I mentioned, we already had the first call, but we will have other calls in the following years. And the idea, I would like to invite the people that are listening to us that, stay tuned and keep following updates of the A2D facility for the following calls that we'll take also next year. And as well, I would like to highlight that from the lessons learned from this first call, not to have, we are really looking for projects that create this catalytic or lighthouse effect in the countries that are innovative on new technologies, and in this case on critical minerals through the midstream and downstream of the supply chain. Caro? And as part of the A2D facility, and also to take better decisions and to see how can we close the gap and support countries better, we had the idea of having this market assessment in order to understand and cover with evidence analysis the different landscapes of critical minerals innovation, but also the stakeholders, barriers, initiatives, and SDGs impact, and also the financial delivery mechanisms and existing projects, in order to also understand the enabling environment that are in the countries, and to be able to support also the new technologies and projects in the countries. We have this market assessment, which it's mainly focused on the midstream, covering parts like processing and refining, but also downstream as recycling and the end of the cycle of these critical minerals. And with this, Caro, I would like to give the floor to Martin Dietrich Brauch, which is the lead researcher of the Columbia Center on Sustainable Investment, and was also the lead on developing this project of the market assessment with the support of course of his colleagues of the Columbia University. Please, in case of questions, don't forget to send them directly through the Q&A, and we will cover them at the end of the session. Please, Martin, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valeria. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Martin Dietrich Brauch, and I'm honored to represent our team of economic, legal, and policy experts from the Columbia Center on Sustainable Investment, CCSI, and Columbia Engineering here at Columbia University in New York City. I'll present to you today our comprehensive market assessment on critical minerals innovation in developing countries. Over the past 5 months, we've collected and analyzed quantitative and qualitative primary data, produced secondary data, and leveraged our technical knowledge as well as our network of industry stakeholders in developing this work. Next slide, please. The first objective of our market assessment is to understand the nexus of 6 dimensions that are relevant to critical minerals value chains: stakeholders, initiatives, financing mechanisms, technologies, and impacts on the Sustainable Development Goals. And I will explore these dimensions in greater detail later on. Another objective is to strategically evaluate relevant technologies and markets and identify potential lighthouse projects, as Valeria was mentioning, for technological innovation that are in need of support to facilitate their commercialization and scale up in developing countries. And a final objective is to provide findings that will support activities and organizations focused on accelerating innovation in critical minerals in developing countries, such as the UNIDO A2D facility. Next slide, please. So circumscribing the scope of our assessment was our first major challenge. Several lists of critical minerals exist, and we chose to zoom into minerals that are critical to the energy transition, playing a key role in energy storage, the production of strong permanent magnets, and the production and catalysis of renewables-based hydrogen, namely the minerals that you see listed in the slide: lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt, graphite, rare earth elements, REEs, copper, and platinum group metals, PGMs. And in terms of technology, our assessment focuses on the mid and downstream segments of critical mineral value chains, midstream encompassing the processing and refining of critical minerals into usable forms, as well as the recovery of resources from mining byproducts such as process tailings, electro-refining sludge, and pyrometallurgical slag. And the downstream segment extends beyond the manufacturing, assembly, and distribution of final products, but also covers the recovery, repurposing, and recycling of valuable materials from secondary sources, as well as end-of-life manufactured goods. So just to note that the scope of our assessment does not cover primarily extraction upstream from primary sources of materials. We used the technology readiness level, TRL, which is a scale of 1 to 9 that is used to evaluate the progress of technological development and its readiness for development or commercialization. So the higher the TRL, the closest to commercialization the project is, or the technology is. And our focus is on companies and technologies at TRLs 6 and 7 within developing countries. These technologies would likely be at a higher TRL level in a developed country, but they may still require validation and refinement in relevant local and regional environments when brought to developing countries. But also to capture potential technology transfer opportunities and to cover, we also cover more mature technologies and innovations from developed countries where these technologies are already at a TRL level 8 or 9, to the extent that there's an opportunity to transfer this technology to a developing country. And if we can go back actually to the previous slide, just to note that the work was developed in 2 phases. We started in phase 1 from a macro level analysis of 30 developing countries selected out of 131 OECD ODA recipients in the 3 developing country regions: Africa, Asia and South Pacific, or ASP in short, and Latin America and the Caribbean, LAC in short. And then in phase 2, we conducted deep dives in 9 countries, 3 from each of these developing country regions. And now we can go to the next slide to have a quick peek at which countries we worked with. So this map shows the names of all the 30 countries we selected and assessed in phase 1. And in orange, you see the 9 deep dive countries. In Africa, Namibia, South Africa, and Zambia. In ASP, India, Indonesia, and Turkey. And in LAC, Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico. Next slide, please. As I noted, our assessment navigates the nexus of 6 dimensions. So we first map out the key stakeholders, then we looked into policy, legal, and regulatory frameworks, collaborative initiatives, as well as financing mechanisms for technological innovation. And jointly, we call these the enabling environment for technological innovation and critical minerals. But we also identify specific technologies, specific innovators working on those technologies and projects that they're deploying, and we examine the impacts of technological innovation on the achievement of key sustainable development goals, or SDGs. So let's look at each of these dimensions in greater detail in the next slide, please. So starting with the stakeholder mapping, our assessment achieved a macro level understanding of the relevant stakeholder groups and their actual and potential roles in technological innovation in the mid and downstream segments. Relevant stakeholders span across the public and private sectors, and they include government bodies and regulatory agencies, international organizations, financial institutions, mining and metal companies, especially those that are vertically integrated and working more in the mid and downstream, industry associations in this space, small and medium enterprise innovators, academic and research institutions, among other stakeholders. And we can move to the next one, please. In terms of policy, legal, and regulatory frameworks, we evaluate and rate the policy readiness of the 30 developing countries that we studied, assessing aspects such as their renewable energy frameworks, their legal frameworks for mining up, mid, and downstream, fiscal incentives that affect decarbonization technologies, as well as circular economy regulations or frameworks that support sustainable resource management and recycling and end-of-life management more generally. This analysis provides an overview of relative strengths and areas for improvement, and it allows us to rank the countries based on their innovation-friendly environments, then identify those countries that have the greatest potential for fostering technological development in the mid and downstream, and ultimately allowed us to select the 9 deep dive countries. And here you just have a snapshot of the high-level analysis that we did. Countries that we rated high implemented comprehensive and robust policies and incentives to encourage technological innovation, to facilitate advanced critical mineral processing, to support domestic industries that manufacture or assemble products using critical minerals, and that promote the circular economy. In countries that we rated medium or low are still in the process of establishing their policy and regulatory frameworks and infrastructure. Even where there are nascent policy frameworks, there is a trend, as we identify, towards more R&D, innovation, sustainability, and circularity. And just a few statistics here of our analysis. 50% of the 30 countries that we analyzed rated high in renewable energy targets and policies for technological innovation, R&D, and critical minerals processing and refining. Then 30% of these countries rated high in policies for assembly and manufacturing, and fewer, 6.7%, rated high in policies for circular economy, recycling, and waste management. And of course, our full report presents more granular data on how each of the 30 countries was rated regarding each of these policy areas that we selected. Can move to the next one, please. This analysis of initiatives identified and evaluated ongoing and emerging collaborative efforts aimed at developing, deploying, and scaling up technological innovation to help overcome challenges in the mid and downstream segments, improve their efficiency, contribute to the SDGs, notably climate action and clean energy. We've identified numerous initiatives by international organizations, governments, industry, other stakeholders, among the stakeholders that we listed before in our mapping, that support technological innovation in critical minerals in developing countries. So we analyzed a total of 100 global, regional, or national initiatives, including financing mechanisms representing 53% of those 100 initiatives. And you see a few examples here in this table, as well as other collaborative initiatives accounting for 47% of the analyzed initiatives. Either they seek to finance innovation projects specifically or to build up the enabling environment for mid and downstream activities. And among the gaps that we identified in these initiatives are the needs for greater scale in these initiatives, finer coordination among them as to which policy interventions to prioritize, which minerals to prioritize, which segments to prioritize, depending on the various markets, and the need for increasing the sharing of knowledge and data on the technologies, as well as the drivers and barriers that move them. Next slide, please. So here are some of our general takeaways as to the overall enabling environment of policy initiatives, financing mechanisms, looking into the 9 deep dive countries and doing so through a regional lens. So we're going to start with the 3 countries that we analyzed in the African region, Namibia, South Africa, and Zambia. On the strength side, we see here that all three have mineral beneficiation strategies. There are several examples of bilateral cooperation agreements, such as Namibia's agreement with the EU on raw materials value chains, South Africa's partnership with the United Kingdom on minerals for clean energy technologies, and Zambia's partnership with Japan's Organization for Metals and Energy Security. All three countries are also involved in relevant regional or continental initiatives, such as the African Green Minerals Strategy, the DRC Zambia Battery Council. And in terms of policies advancing SDGs, the three have policies to advance SDG 1 on poverty eradication and SDG 9 on industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Now, on the side of areas for improvement in the three African countries, all three can work more on strengthening their circular economy, recycling, waste management policies. We've also identified that their power and logistics infrastructure pose constraints to their overall industrial development. And despite strengths in certain policy, legal, and regulatory areas, these countries still need support to build up the institutional capacity, both to strengthen their regulatory frameworks and to enforce those regulatory frameworks. And also policies on gender equality and responsible consumption and production can also be made stronger on the SDG side. We can move on to the next one, please. Now let's do our regional takeaways for the three ASP countries, India, Indonesia, and Turkey. So all of them have stronger circular economy, recycling, waste management policies, which we see differently from what we've just seen for Africa. They provide tax incentives for technology development, create special economic zones for industrialization and downstream. For example, India and Turkey in particular participate in the mineral security partnership with several developed countries. All of these countries provide national financing mechanisms to support innovation mid and downstream, such as the Make in India program, the Indonesia Battery Corporation, and the Turkish Growth and Innovation Fund. And in terms of SDGs, policies are more robust for SDGs 9, Industry, Innovation, and Infrastructure, and 12, Responsible Consumption and Production. And in terms of areas where these three countries could improve, we have identified engaging more in regional cooperation and initiatives, reducing their reliance on fossil fuel energy imports, and strengthening their policies for advancing SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, and SDG 13, climate action. Let's move on to the next one, please. And that's our final regional takeaway for the three LAC countries, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, in our deep dive. Among their strengths are the financial incentives, including tax rebates, exemptions for companies in the mid and downstream. Mexico has set up a state-owned company for the lithium value chain. At the same time, Argentina and Brazil have strong R&D frameworks and initiatives. Brazil has also set up a noteworthy industry-led initiative that helps coordinate private sector actors working in the space, mining hub. And all three countries seem to benefit broadly from support from multilateral development banks, including through private loans from the International Finance Corporation, IFC, and programs set up by the Inter-American Development Bank, the Regional Development Bank. Among other SDGs, particularly strong ones are policies for SDG 1, no poverty, SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, and SDG 13, climate action. And in terms of areas of improvement in these three countries, we've identified the need for more stringent circular economy policies that apply to critical minerals. Also the need for more cohesive national frameworks, moving away from a bit of fragmentation of policies for mid and downstream across various ministries and government agencies. Also the need for more engagement in regional cooperation and initiatives, and for stronger policies advancing responsible production and consumption, SDG 12, in the minerals space. Can move on to the next one. Thank you. So looking at innovators and technologies and projects, we've identified that technological innovation in critical mineral value chains in the developing countries that we studied is relying primarily on technology transfer from developed countries, which was not the focus, especially of our work, because we were looking at homegrown technological innovation. And to the extent that we're looking into homegrown technological innovation, we have concluded that this homegrown innovation is happening in the mid and downstreams. It's slowly emerging in the developing countries analyzed, and it's been supported by policy frameworks, incentives, and initiatives that have been implemented largely within the last half decade. The map that you're seeing highlights and indicates some noteworthy technologies, minerals of focus, and technological trends in the 9 deep dive developing countries. Technological and market trends include, for example, in Zambia, battery manufacturing technologies building on the copper and cobalt markets. In Turkey, the focus on mid and downstream processing for the manufacturing and assembly of solar panels and components of solar PV panels. And in Argentina, technologies in support of the growing lithium and battery manufacturing and recycling industry. And noteworthy technologies especially include in Africa downstream technologies for recycling lithium-ion batteries using safer chemicals and methods that are less environmentally harmful. In Asia Pacific, in South Pacific, we see midstream technologies for producing battery-grade products, for recycling batteries, and in Latin America and Caribbean, midstream technologies for refining lithium from salar brines or clay deposits. And of course, this is a very tight snapshot. There's much more detail in our longer version in the full report that is soon to be published. We can move on to the next one, please. In this analysis, we've looked into and analyzed challenges for innovation in critical minerals in developing countries, and here are just a few of those that we've identified. First, the insufficient existing R&D investment and also the insufficient existing ecosystems for innovation. There are power and logistics infrastructure constraints to industrial development throughout these countries. Technological innovation and infrastructure development take up high costs and long lead times. There are also gaps in local skills, and access to skills development opportunities are limited throughout these countries. Government institutional capacity to build up and enforce regulatory frameworks are also a challenge that several of these countries face. Insufficient economic incentives and government support, especially for those smaller innovators and startups. And of course, we can't draw conclusions broadly for all countries. There are specific challenges and investment risks that depend on the geology of the resources each country has, mineral resource availability, material complexity, and technology requirements that would be specific to the market that we're looking at. Next, please. And general takeaways on opportunities, without going into the depths of the opportunities in each country, we have concluded that implementing already available and proven technologies at higher TRLs in developed countries can be an opportunity in developing countries. In some, adapting those existing proven technologies at higher TRL levels in developed countries and bringing them to developing countries, adapting them to the local conditions, addressing local constraints, and improving operational efficiency. And then we see different types of focuses. For example, in countries that have primary mineral resources, and you have here examples in South Africa, Indonesia, Argentina, one opportunity is to leverage existing upstream industry from and technology and infrastructure and workforce and skills that already exist in these countries at the upstream, and leveraging that for vertical integration across the value chain to develop the mid and downstream segments. So we see a trend, for example, to develop a PGM industry in South Africa, a nickel industry in Indonesia, and a lithium industry in Argentina. And then in countries that have limited primary mineral resources, which is in the 9 deep dive countries here, the case of India and Turkey, the trend to invest in downstream processing and assembly, for example, battery manufacturing and recycling in India, and solar panel component production in Turkey. And one opportunity that innovation brings across the board in these countries is the opportunity to make a positive impact on the Sustainable Development Goals, which neatly brings us to our next slide, please, where we discuss the opportunities for SDG advancement. Mid and downstream activities and critical minerals innovation provide substantive opportunities for developing countries to advance the SDGs, whether directly or indirectly. SDGs that include direct linkages to critical minerals innovation include SDG 1, investing in innovation creates jobs, fosters skills diversification, and increase government revenues. And by doing so, they drive economic growth and poverty eradication. Also, R&D in critical minerals mid and downstream can foster industrial development, technological innovation, and the development and expansion of resilient infrastructure, contributing to SDG 9. By producing components that are essential to renewable energy systems, the mid and downstream segments of the critical minerals value chain help reduce local and global emissions, thereby contributing to climate action, SDG 13, through decarbonization. And on the indirect linkages side, through targeted interventions focused on gender equality, innovation can also encourage women's participation in technical and leadership roles and reduce women's time poverty, contributing to SDG 5. By producing key components for the clean energy technologies, these activities in the mid and downstream segments can support just transitions, renewable energy deployment, and then contribute to affordable and clean energy. And technologies that improve the refining, the manufacturing, and recycling of these goods containing critical minerals, they can help promote responsible consumption and production patterns, contributing to SDG 12. Finally, these technologies help minimize emissions, reduce waste, or reduce stress on water, land, biodiversity, and so they can result in reduced impacts on terrestrial ecosystems, contributing to SDG 15, life on land. We can move to the next one, please. We will conclude with 10 recommendations to scale up and ramp up technological innovation in the mid and downstream segments of critical mineral value chains. Here are the first 5 ones. So our first recommendation is to increase international support to developing country governments and other stakeholders, also in the private sector, in the innovation ecosystem. And that support should come in the form of technical assistance, capacity building for policies, and policy advice as well, and access to capital to implement both regulatory and reforms that are necessary, as well as to launch new technological innovation projects. Our second recommendation is that international and regional organizations and development finance institutions, multilateral development banks, and others should build on the initiatives both for the enabling environment, and we have here the example of the World Bank RISE partnership that helps developing country governments build up the enabling environment, the policies, the initiatives, the stakeholder engagements, the financing mechanisms, but also initiatives that focus on specific innovation projects. And here we have the great example of the UNIDO A2D facility that provides funding to push these technologies through the commercialization barrier. And both support from international and regional organizations is needed on both sides. Then our third recommendation is the creation of a global multi-stakeholder platform to coordinate initiatives. You noted that I mentioned we analyzed 100. We need to foster more collaboration, to share more knowledge across these initiatives, more data on technological innovation that's happening across developing countries. And UNIDO is particularly well positioned to house such a platform coordinating all these existing and emerging stakeholder collaboration initiatives and financing mechanisms that already exist on critical minerals. Our fourth recommendation, we recommend that UNIDO should take also the lead in ensuring the continuous gathering, transparency, and analysis of data on innovation. In this discrete exercise of this assessment over the past 5 years, we've realized that much more data gathering should continue to happen through rolling surveys through public databases, so that more data and analysis can continue to be produced on these emerging technologies in developing countries. Then our fifth recommendation here, we have looked into how domestic policy can contribute, both in developing countries and developed countries. In developing countries, we recommend focusing on providing regulatory guidelines for critical minerals innovation, also supporting domestic collaborations and offering innovation incentives to the extent possible. And for developed countries, we recommend promoting international cooperation, facilitating knowledge transfer and technology transfer, and providing access to affordable finance for these technological innovation projects. Let's move to the final one. So our sixth recommendation, which is the first one that you're seeing in the slide, developing countries should prioritize the development of infrastructure for energy, communications, logistics that are, as I noted before, hindering broader industrial development constraints. And of course, this has to be done in line with the SDGs as well as with national priorities and strategies in these countries. Then we also recommend the creation of and strengthening of programs to support small and medium enterprises that are involved in technological innovation processes in developing countries, and supporting them to partner with other stakeholders to have access to more funding opportunities, including UNIDO's A2D facility and similar ones. Eighth recommendation, policymakers should incentivize circular economy policies and practices through regulations, incentives, innovation funding. And for the private sector in particular, we recommend strengthening the business case for circularity by showcasing cost savings that circular economy policies and practices can bring, showcasing that circularity can bring new revenue streams for the private sector and improve resource efficiency. Our ninth recommendation is to support industry-led initiatives that coordinate mining value chain stakeholders or mineral value chain stakeholders, if you want to put it more broadly, around common challenges and priorities that they have for innovation. And I noted before, Brazil's Mining Hub is one example, but there are others led by mining associations and mineral value chain actors that can be encouraged and expanded. And our final recommendation, besides fostering technological innovation in developing countries, which was the focus of our work here, we also recommend that international organizations and governments put efforts to put in place or make efforts to put in place the regulatory and financial conditions that facilitate technology transfer from companies that are based in developed countries and emerging economies to developing country markets that we studied here in this market assessment. I'll stop here, hopefully leaving some time for comments and questions. I think we're doing well on time. I just wanted to note very briefly that we've learned a lot throughout this process of this market assessment and truly enjoyed the opportunity to collaborate with the UNIDO A2D team. And I have to mention here, Valeria, Peter, Carolina, as well as others, as well as the UK DES&Z team. And we look forward from CCSI's side to continued collaboration with UNIDO and other partners on critical minerals innovation. Thank you very much. And back to you, Valeria.
Yeah, Martin, thank you very much. I think it's a really big scale market assessment put in few minutes. So I really would like to invite the people that are actually joining this webinar or listening afterwards that actually have the time to read we have the executive summary report, but also we have the whole market assessment that will allow to have a more clarity and knowledge and of all related with the deep dive countries and so on. We have many questions, so I tried to put them a little bit together in some questions that were very repetitive, and I think that they were very interesting. So I will start with the first one, which is there were many questions related on all recycling part of the supply chain and we have a question which is, how do policy frameworks and financial mechanisms in developing countries impact the development and adaptation of innovations in critical minerals processing and recycling?
Thank you so much, Valeria. And I will, I think the question was specifically focused on examples we assessed in India. So maybe I can provide a few examples on recycling and waste management policies assessed there. And just a brief note, right, because we have several other questions and more detail will be provided in the report. So I will just note, especially India's e-waste management rules of 2022, which feature an extended producer responsibility or EPR regime for e-waste recycling and recycling targets for electrical and electronic equipment or EEE producers. And it also controls and regulates the import of e-waste for disposal. And there's also India's, also from the same year, 2022, battery waste management rules mandating the collection and recycling of EV batteries, increasing recovery targets, and the minimum use of domestically recycled materials, and recycling and requiring producers to meet targets to make financial contributions to a public fund. So these are just, of course, examples of policies in the recycling and waste management space that can serve as inspiration and examples for other countries. India is, of course, just one among them, and you're invited to check out the more detailed description of all the policies that we analyzed.
Thank you, Martin. We also, this is a type of question that we always receive when we discuss about critical minerals. A bit of disclaimer, no, this market assessment was not focused on the upstream, not on mining, but we do have a question related on the human side, and which I would like to focus it more in terms of how do actually these technological advancements in the mid and downstream segments of the critical minerals contribute to the SDGs, especially on the climate action and the gender equality.
Thank you so much, Valeria. So I think to answer this question, I think it's useful to clarify. First, I noted it briefly. Our assessment didn't focus on the upstream segment. So primary extraction from primary sources of mineral value chains was not covered per se. And the framing that we used for our assessment was the SDG framing. So the Sustainable Development Goals. We did not use a specific or explicit human rights focus in this assessment, not because we don't care about human rights, of course, we do. It was a methodological choice and also the mandate that we received from UNIDO to look at the mid and downstream, the processing and recycling aspects of these technologies from an SDG or through the SDG lens. And I think what's important to note here, especially to mention a few of the SDGs that Valeria just mentioned, our assessment focused on how these technological innovations can contribute positively to increasing the SDGs. Our assessment did not focus on how technological innovation might negatively affect the SDGs, right? That was the mandate and the scope of our research. And in terms of SDGs, especially that we noted here on gender equality and clean energy, if I recall correctly, were those the two that you noted now, Valeria, that you wanted me to focus on specifically? Mm-hmm. So gender equality, I think I noted in my presentation, depends on targeted innovations. Of course, a technology in the abstract, implementing that technology without specific interventions focused on gender equality does not improve gender equality. There has to be an explicit focus on increasing women's participation in roles, both technical and leadership, and to reduce women's time poverty, as I noted. And in terms of clean energy, I think the key angle here that we used in our SDG assessment is that by producing these clean energy technologies, these technological innovations in the mid and downstream segments can support just transitions and can improve and accelerate renewable energy deployment by improving processes for the refining and the beneficiation of critical minerals, as well as downstream recovering those materials, recycling them, reusing them for productive uses, especially for clean energy technologies. We're supporting the achievement of the SDG on affordable and clean energy.
Thank you, Martin. Okay. As part of the questions, we also have, I think, a question that maybe most of the people also have, and if it can be extensive, but maybe you can provide us a little bit more about the criteria and the methodology that you use for assessing and prioritizing the countries that were chosen in the first phase and in the deep dive.
Thank you, Valeria. That is, of course, the slide that I deleted last from this shortened presentation, just in case there wasn't enough time to cover it all. But I'm happy to jump to my notes here and give you a bit of an idea of how we selected the countries. So at the first phase, we looked especially at the policy readiness of the various countries. We looked at all 131 in all the three developing country regions, 131 countries that are eligible for ODA. And then official development assistance, sorry, for adding an acronym in here, don't need to confuse anyone. So we looked at all of these countries, and we first looked into indicators to assess their policy readiness, and we looked at the various areas of law and policy that I noted during my presentation: mining legal frameworks, renewable energy targets, environmental protection policies, circular economy policies. So we calculated a quantitative indicator based on our qualitative assessment of the quality of these policies across all of the countries. In addition to policy readiness, we looked at technology readiness through indicators as proxy for technology readiness level, mineral supply and scarcity, renewable energy per capita, mineral processing in or publications in mineral processing research, and so on. So that was the technology component of the selection. We also looked at long-term financial sustainability mechanisms, especially grants that are received by these countries or R&D investment in these countries, as well as finally knowledge production and sharing in these countries. So essentially looking at, let me look here at some indicators: total patents that were granted in these countries, IP payments, patent cooperation treaty, and other treaty participation by these countries to the extent that contributes to increased sharing and production of knowledge. That was for phase one. And then in phase two, we looked again at these indicators, and we gave a 1/3 weight to the policy readiness, 1/3 weight to the technology readiness element, and then the two final ones that I explained, the long-term financial sustainability and knowledge production and sharing, together accounted for the final third of our methodology. So taking into account these various quantitative and qualitative indicators, we selected first the 30 countries for phase one, and then the 9 deep dive countries for phase two. Keeping especially in phase two, in phase one, we did it as well to try to keep a geographical balance, not as strict, right? We had 30, but we didn't have 10, 10, and 10 from the 3 regions. One of the regions had a few more on average, but in phase two, we did have 3, 3, and 3 per region to keep a regional balance in our analysis.
Thank you, Martin. We also received few questions related on the technology transfer from developed countries to developing countries. We have one question that it's like, in which countries are these technologies already working, or in terms of, for example, recycling in developed countries, but also the influence that is technologies that are working in countries, for example, of China, that these influence, let's say, that the new technologies and implementation and in countries like Indonesia. So it will be interesting from your side to hear about this, which was also part of our discussions many times, of which technologies are working in which countries and how they're being able to be transferred to developing countries. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Valeria, for the question. So that speaks to our final recommendation on improving technology transfer along with technology or homegrown technology development in developing countries. And our recommendation is precisely to increase the opportunities for partnerships between developing countries and developed countries, as well as emerging economies, and China being one of them, where technologies are already advanced and can be leveraged. One of our takeaways and recommendations is to avoid reinventing the wheel. If these technologies are already at a high technology readiness level in developed countries, there's a need to create partnerships and especially through joint ventures or other technology transfer facilitation mechanisms between companies in developed countries and where these technologies are more advanced, and the companies and innovators in developing countries that will then adapt those technologies to local conditions. It wasn't an explicit focus of our work, but we've identified the need for greater partnerships and collaborations, especially between companies in the EU and the United States and China, where these innovations are happening at higher TRLs, and partnering with organizations leading innovations in the developing countries that we studied, especially Indonesia, Turkey, Argentina, Brazil, and others, to make sure that technological innovation happens where it's needed the most, rather than trying to play catch up with these technologies that are already at a higher level in developed countries, and resorting to homegrown technological development only when it's truly economically justified. And so before turning to homegrown development, there's a need to first look into these technologies that exist, transfer them, adapt them, improve the efficiency and sustainability, and to do so, as I noted, partnerships, but also reforming international frameworks to facilitate access to these technologies, and broadening access to intellectual property rights, and other recommendations that we have in greater detail in our report.
Okay. We also have some questions in terms of the minerals that were selected and how why we chose these minerals for the assessment. Just a clear clarification in terms of this. The main purpose of this is just the clean energy transition. But of course, Martin, if you would like to provide additional inputs, please.
Absolutely. Thanks, Valeria. So we look through various lists of critical minerals, including the Department of Energy in the US, and the list by the UK, the list by the International Energy Agency. And these lists vary, and you can easily work with half the periodic table. If you consider all of them critical, the scope of the assessment would have been much broader and difficult to manage in a 5-month project. So what we decided to do was to examine these various lists and really focus on the overlaps across these lists and the energy critical minerals, considering the inclination here of this study to focus on the global clean energy transition. So what we did was to include the elements that are critical for energy storage, and I said this in my presentation: energy storage, production of permanent magnets, and the production and catalysis of renewable hydrogen. So lithium, of course, is used extensively in lithium-ion batteries for EVs, for energy storage systems, and its demand is expected to grow. Then we have nickel, which is important for high energy density batteries, which are crucial for electric vehicles, and it can improve battery life and performance. Manganese is key in lithium-ion batteries, but also in wind turbines and solar energy systems, so we chose that metal as well. Cobalt is used in battery cathodes, high energy density lithium-ion batteries as well, EVs, and portable electronics. Graphite is a key component in the anodes of lithium-ion batteries. Rare earths are used in permanent magnets, wind turbines, EV motors. They enhance the sustainability of magnets. Copper is essential for any electrical wiring, motors, renewable energy infrastructure, for transmission and distribution as well, because of its high electrical conductivity. And PGMs are used in fuel cells, platinum group metals are used in fuel cells for hydrogen power vehicles, catalytic converters, and electronics. So just to clarify the choice of each of the materials that we included in the scope, and of course, more details are provided in the report.
Yeah. We also have a very interesting question regarding of the relation between or connection between the coordination of these initiatives or technologies with current soft law instruments on critical minerals like memorandums of understandings. This also was part of the assessment. So Martin, maybe you can provide us a little bit more on this.
Absolutely. Among those 100 initiatives that we examined are precisely those memoranda of understanding between developing countries and developed countries, trying to build up value chains for mid and downstream processing. Often those memoranda of understanding also cover the upstream segment, working especially with developing countries that have the mineral resources for extraction as well. And we understand that it's important to have a whole of value chain approach, looking both at the resource where it's extracted, but also bringing leveraging this opportunity for industrialization in developing countries so that they can move away from the pattern of being exporters of raw materials and use the opportunity of technological innovation in critical minerals to add value to local production, to create jobs, to leverage skills development, to increase the number of jobs as well, and highly qualified, highly skilled jobs. And these partnerships, whether they're bilateral with developed country partners or interregional, as we're seeing emerging, especially in Africa, in the context, for example, of the African Continental Free Trade Agreements and other regional agreements within Africa that have focus on critical mineral value chains. We think that this is an opportunity for developing countries not only to improve the value addition from traditionally upstream focused and export focused countries, but also to industrialize and bring along or generate these sustainability and sustainable development co-benefits from industrialization.
Thank you, Martin. We have a good number of questions, and we don't have too much time to actually answer all of these questions. But just to close, we also received questions of potential, for example, in Africa, to have innovative technologies that are not focused on upstream. And I would like to invite you all also to read the section that Columbia did on Africa, on the potential of how these new technologies are coming up, and also organizations like UNIDO and many others that are supporting the implementation of projects and filling the gap between upstream and mainstream and downstream in the different continents and countries. With this, thank you very much, Martin, for the presentation, and I hand over to Peter. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Valeria, and we're sort of nicely on time. And just to say thank everyone for the interest in the webinar and joining today. It's great to see such a strong interest in this market assessment, and also thank you to Columbia University for doing such a great job of a really high quality sort of market assessment throughout this year. As Valeria alluded to, the market assessment is big. It's 200 or 300 pages, and it is a lot of wealth of evidence, data in there. So obviously in this webinar, we can only really touch the surface of the key findings, but each of the slides is a whole research question in itself, and there's a wealth of data on each of those slides that goes into a lot of detail. So we'll be publishing the main report shortly, but we'll start by publishing the executive summary, and we'll also have that available in Spanish and French as well, so for a wider audience to be able to digest that. If you do have any questions that we couldn't answer today, and I know there's a lot of interest, a lot of questions that probably we didn't get answered today, please do feel free to send those questions to the A2D Facility email box, so A2D at unido.org, and we'll get back to you. And just to sort of close as well, we do have 2 other webinars. So we also have 2 other market assessments that were also launched at COP29. So tomorrow at the same time, 2 o'clock CET time, we'll be presenting the clean hydrogen market assessment in developing countries. And then on Thursday, we'll be presenting the smart energy and industrial decarbonisation market assessment, which are all both focused on accelerating innovation in developing countries. So with that, we can close, and just to thank everyone again for attending, and to Columbia University for the excellent presentation and work. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.